All right, you animals. This is the one you asked me for. Borderline personality disorder. It's never been more fitting time to do this one, so I figured, why the hell not? There you go. Like that. Experimenting with new sounds. How's that? That's my band, by the way, in case you were wondering. It's interesting is there, I got that off now too. What's interesting is with the website's up now, and we've got new merch. We've got t-shirts and beanies up there right now. So just if you're interested, if that's your groove, then go check out trialofascension.com. The link is in the description. So with no further ado, let's get into borderline personality disorder. I've had a lot of requests for this. This is not the first time I've done this particular topic. It's one of my most requested topics. And we just had an interview with Meghan Markle and her husband, Harry Markle, and the high priestess of the goddess herself, Oprah Winfrey. And that was on Sunday night, and people begged me to watch this, and I could stomach probably the highlights of it. I watched it for about 20 minutes, and I was, what annoys me more than anything is not so much the interview. I mean, the interview's bad, don't get me wrong, but the commercials that are just like fed into this, knowing damn well that it's going to be a highly viewed show. Very much like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. It's almost like, the prince and the princess kind of thing now. So it's and that's by design, just so you guys know. So how does this relate to borderline personality disorder? I've got a really great essay that's on my blog, therationalmale.com. Excuse me. Wait. Devil Mountain Coffee. And it's called borderline personality disorder. And I get into it. This is something I can speak to personally because for about 3.5 years, I was involved in an LTR, a long-term relationship with a woman who had borderline personality disorder. I didn't realize it until later on because at that time, first of all, I didn't have any kind of degree in psychology, and I wasn't even aware that there was a diagnosis for apparently what she had, and that was called borderline personality disorder. Now, how do I make that connection to Meghan Markle? Well, let's backtrack a little bit. I don't think Meghan Markle has borderline personality disorder per se. I think perhaps she has narcissistic personality disorder, which is NPD. I'll read you guys the descriptions and the characteristics, the aspects that account for both of those. But I wanted to start with borderline personality disorder because that's something that I can speak to, like I said, personally, and dealing with this stuff. That's what prompted me to write that very well trafficked blog post that I did way back in 2012. And again, it's still trafficked pretty well today. Anytime I mention it, people look me up, they look up my name, and then they look up that, borderline personality disorder, Rollo Tomasi, and you'll find it there. And it's something a lot of guys are interested in because they seem to think that their girlfriends or the person that they are involved with is just so psychotic and so crazy that she has borderline personality disorder. So I'm going to read from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. This is number 4, I believe, because when I wrote that essay, that's I believe that's the version that the DSM was in at that time. I think we're up to like 5 or 6 now. But I didn't even realize that there was a diagnosis for this. In fact, I didn't even realize it until I was actually in college and learning about this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, that describes my ex to a T. And I mean, to the point where it's just like craziness. And one of the things I should say before I read the rest of this, one thing I should say about women who actually genuinely have borderline personality disorder, and it's more prevalent in women. Let's just throw that one out there right now. Statistically more prevalent in women. Narcissistic personality disorder, I believe it's more prevalent in women, but it's not as prevalent in women as BPD. And so when I say BPD, that's what I mean, borderline personality disorder. There are men who are actually, have narcissistic personality disorder as well. That's not a hard leap for most. But in the manosphere, and at least as far back as 2012, when I wrote this article, diagnosing your girlfriend or your ex or whoever with BPD just sort of seems like the I guess the disorder du jour, right? Because it's so fitting for women today to exemplify or to manifest these behaviors. And there's a separation, I think, between like a genuine BPD and just a regular woman who is sort of suffering, or I won't say suffering, but manifesting aspects of BPD that we'd just take for granted. And most guys, myself included, by the way, we tend to overlook those symptoms and overlook those characteristics as maybe part of a larger neurosis in women, because a lot, when I read these, you'll understand what I'm talking about. A lot of these aspects are so prevalent in modern women today that we're just like, man, that's just her being crazy. And so you kind of get a little mixed up between what's crazy and what's really crazy, right? So when I'm saying, this person has a clinical, disorder, that's different than, bitches be crazy. That's different. Okay. I mean, that's just sort of casually saying, you so crazy, girl. That's not crazy. Like insane, like mentally disordered, like imbalanced. That's what I'm talking about here. So when I hear the term BPD get thrown around, it's kind of like when guys say, oh, I'm autistic or I have Asperger's syndrome. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm sure it does. But I would say that the incidence of that actual clinical diagnosis is much rarer than most guys particularly, would like to, diagnose themselves with. I'm on the Asperger's syndrome scale or spectrum, right? Maybe you are. Maybe you are a little bit autistic. Maybe you just have some, you have low social intelligence. Maybe just simply nobody ever taught you how to sort of read people. I think this is something that is becoming more and more endemic in our society right now, particularly in the manosphere, particularly in the Lost Boys generation. This is the generation that has been raised behind a monitor or a smartphone screen or whatever. And as a result of that, our social learning suffers, and particularly for men. For women, I think they still have that social intelligence to a degree, but I think they've suffered as well from modern technology, right? Social media. Guys, when they are socialized and acculturated from behind a screen, from behind the buffers of that screen, then it tends to have an impact on their social intelligence, let's say. For women, that lack of social intelligence is manifested in ego investments and overinflation of their egos as it is. I think probably, the things that are going on right now in the manosphere pretty much attest to that. So when I say, or when I or anybody else says, a person this girl has BPD, take that with a grain of salt. I am not a clinical psychologist. I do not have a DR in front of my name as much as people would like to put one. I'm Professor Emeritus. Let's just say that. I have a keen interest in psychology. My background is in behavioral psychology, not evolutionary psychology. And my behavioral psychology the focus of it was personality studies. So behaviorism and personality. So those are just putting that out there right now. Don't take what I say as like, he's a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. I have a keen interest in it, but I do not have a private practice. Again, I do not have my doctorate or anything like that. So all caveats aside, let's get down to it here. I'm going to put this up on the screen. And the good news is that I don't necessarily have to. There we go. I got it right there. It's a cross. Oh. Okay. So let's start with borderline personality disorder. And this is the diagnosis for it. Let's put that up. And can you see that? Yes, you can. Is that better? Or is this better? No, this is better. Maybe you can see this better than I can. And let me let me take the branding off so you can see the full thing. There we go. All right, I'm going to read this to you. This is the diagnostics for the DSM definition of what borderline personality disorder is. Okay, this is what is characteristic. A pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image, and affects, and marked impulsivity beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. Now, these are the attributes or the aspects of it. 1, frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. 2, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. Very close to, I'm going to say bipolar, but certainly manic depression, like highs and lows, okay? 3, identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. 4, impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging, e.g., spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating, etc., etc. Note, do not include suicidal or self-mutilating behavior covered in criterion 5. So this is separate from that. Now, this is number 5, recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures or threats of self-mutilating behavior. Number 6, affective instability due to a marked reactivity of mood, intense episodic dysphoria, irritability, or anxiety, usually lasting a few hours and only rarely more than a few days. 7, chronic feelings of emptiness. 8, inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger. Now, I associate this with an intense level of jealousy. So when I get to my article, you'll understand what I'm saying here. Frequent displays of temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights. 9, transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. Okay, so that's I can read the rest of this. Is if you want me to give you the actual link to this, I'll throw it in the description. Maybe I'll probably do that anyways. So that's the overview of, there we go, borderline personality disorder. And it's very easy to take those attributes and apply them to women that you're with. I would say that the reason that it is more prevalent right now is because of the acculturation, socialization, how we are raising our young girls into young women. And I think that even if your girlfriend or your wife or whatever is displaying these, that doesn't necessarily mean that she is BPD. She's manifesting certain characteristics of it. Is she doing it chronically? That's another thing. I wanted to also, I'm gonna read just a touch from my essay on this. Okay, so it's better if I just read this because it sort of gives you a little bit of food for thought here. Okay, so this is true BPDs. I had an LTR with a BPD woman for 4 years when I was in my 20s, and I can tell you from experience, it's nothing to laugh at or take lightly. It's particularly damaging for beta men locked in a BPD's negative feedback loop. And by beta men, I mean like blue pill. I use AFCs, like average frustrated chumps, but blue pill guys, right? Guys who are certainly meeting the criteria of what we would identify Prince Harry as. Now, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are a really good example of, at least initially from what I was looking at, a really good example of a very doormat, very blue pill, beta male who got locked in with what I believe initially was a BPD woman, and I still think maybe she is to some degree. But I'm after Sunday's interview with Oprah, I'm beginning to think Meghan is more on the NPD side of things. I'm going to read those descriptions here to you in just a second. So especially when he's developed a soul-crushing one-itis with her and associates himself as the source of her depression and psychosis. This is really important. You guys need to hear this and understand this. So I'm gonna sort of spell this out for you a little bit, because a lot of guys find themselves sort of in this relationship where they're trapped in it, where they're getting crazy good sex, and she's crazy in bed, like porn star class crazy in bed, but she's also crazy out of bed. And it's that sex that kind of draws you back in. And You say, okay, I'm done with it. She's nuts. She's digging her, nails into my arm. She's has a potential for violence. She's crazy, jealous all the time, envious, jealous, whatever you want to call it. And then she goes from that to sort of this it's manic depression, right? It's this manic sex, but then it goes to depression. Then it goes to this manic jealousy kind of thing. So, well, I'll get into that. True BPDs progressively convince their victims that they are the source of her neuroses. So when you've got a Prince Harry and you got a Meghan Markle, the Prince Harry thinks that if I just do these things, if I give up the pheasant hunt, if I sell off my rifle collection, if I stop doing the things I love, if I basically change my identity to satisfy this woman, then her neurosis will be solved. It will be completely, I become the source of that neurosis. And if I could just be a better guy, and I should be, because that's what society, a feminine primary society, is teaching these guys anyways, is that you can be a more perfect guy as long as you support your wife and you're funny and you do all these things, and you're essentially putting her on a pedestal that you can never actually solve. It's a problem you can never actually solve, that you suddenly think that you're the source of that. So you are not yourself. You are who she's molding you to be. And eventually you'll come to believe that it's in your best interest, indeed your responsibility, to be who she wants you to be, to sustain that neurosis. You'll gradually give up on your family and friends, or they will give up on you. Sounds a lot like Prince Harry, right? You will drop all ambitions and passions that directly focus on you, and you will abandon any genuine, independent identity you held for yourself, all because these are threats to the neurotic narrative she constructs for herself and lives out. That's very important, because a lot of guys think that it could never happen to them. I didn't think it could happen to me. And what usually happens, particularly with guys who are blue pill conditioned betas in the first place, or maybe they're not even betas, but they have beta tendencies, or they still haven't quite killed the beta yet, right? They still haven't unlearned their blue pill ideals. They get into a relationship with a BPD or a woman who's like a really super dominant personality. And because they were in a position where they could attract that person, they think they're lucky stars, right? They can't believe their luck. They can't believe that they found a woman that is as hot as this and has this kind of sex and has this kind of desperate, like just hot, tear your clothes off kind of visceral sex with him. And so guys get into a scarcity mode. They think, okay, I found my one. She's gorgeous. She looks good. She takes care of herself. She's hot in bed, but she's a little nuts. But what girl isn't a little nuts today? That's what you're going to tell yourself. What girl isn't a little bit crazy? We've got a little bit of work to do. And so progressively, you'll get most beta guys get wrapped up in this. And it becomes, like I said, a negative feedback loop, although the guy thinks that it's a positive feedback loop. One thing that BPDs will do is they will separate you from your friends. They will separate you from the things that made you in the first place, the things that made you attractive. Those are the things that are the source of her neuroses. So if you could just change those things, if you stop talking to your brother, and Kate Middleton and whoever, you just stop talking to your mother, your grandmother, you stop talking to your friends. Look at what has happened to Prince Harry over the course of when did they get married? 2018, just over the course of like 4 years. He is completely isolated. He's renounced anything that has made him in any way a prince or special. He has given up his hobbies. He is essentially an empty shell that is only filled by Meghan Markle. And I'll tell you how he gets to this point here in just a second, but I want to continue so we understand what a BPD really is here. As I said before, you give up on your friends and you give up on your family, or sometimes they'll just give up on you. So they'll just say, you know what? It is what it is. If they're happy, why does it matter, right? You'll hear women talk about that all the time. Say, well, they're happy, right? She will reward you with conversion to her psychosis with the intermittent reward of crazy hot sex. But this is simply the reinforcer to keep you locked into her narrative. The you will cease to exist, and the character she creates for you will take over. This is especially true for beta chumps who see their BPD as their best only option for a long-term romantic prospect. She's an HB9 to him, and he's never had sex with anything better than a 5 in his whole life. So the risk of catastrophic loss is real and ever present. It's fate that brought them together, and if he can only help allay her fears, she can live happily ever after. So that's really kind of the web that you get drawn into here. In the later stages of a BPD relationship, you will get to the point where her overt cuckolding of you is an acceptable situation. You think you'll mitigate it by negotiating some open relationship status with her. You will internalize the reasoning that negotiating for her desire is preferable to losing her. You will you'll propose that an open relationship means you're both free to bang whoever you want to, when in reality, it's the only way you can rationalize for yourself the fact that she's going to go and bang other guys, and you're going to sit there and accept it because you're locked into her neuroses. She wouldn't need to go bang other guys if you would just be a better guy, right? It's your fault she feels compelled to bang other guys, and you'll believe it. We haven't got to that point with Harry and Meghan just yet, but a lot of people are pointing in that direction. When I did several shows with Pat Campbell about this, because whenever Prince Harry and Meghan Markle came up in a scandal, not a scandal, but whenever they came up in the news between say 2017 and really now, we were always talking about it. It was always something that we were talking about, and I had people just throwing rocks at me all the time, saying, "Oh, you don't know anything about him. He used to fly helicopters in the military. He's alpha." And just looking at the behavior, looking at what's going on, I could read it right from the start. Now, I know a lot of people right now in particular are saying they called this way back in 2017. Okay, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but you didn't call it to the degree that I have. I'm the one that has said that I think that eventually, if things keep going the way that they are, that Prince Harry will end up committing suicide. I don't want him to commit suicide, okay? I'm not wishing death on him. If anything, it's like I wish he would get my book so he could read it and maybe turn his life around. But at the rate things are going, I predicted this way back in the day, back in 2018, I think, is that Harry will end up committing suicide. I have seen it. This is a pattern. I have seen at least 2 people I know personally who have gone through exactly this same template, who have done just that, who've put a noose around their neck or have put a gun in their mouth. I don't want them to do that. I don't want him to be a statistic. But that's where this is leading to eventually, because his investment in Meghan is idealistic, it is blue pill. In some respect, I think he's trying to prove daddy wrong, that he can have the fairy tale. And he is with a woman who has some serious mental and psychological disorders. Even her father says these things. So let's keep going. Should I keep going here? I know it seems like most of their friends still, well, let me see. Keep going here. Let's see. That or the mere suggestion of you being interested in sex with another woman will send her into fits of jealous histrionic rage. I have heard, now this is just rumors. I don't know them personally, but you'll see this in the tabloids all the time where it's like what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. And she flies off into, according to the staff or the help or whatever you want to call it, she flies into histrionic rages. So, and if you've watched, people, you're probably going to ask me why I didn't put some clips of the Oprah thing on here. I don't want to get this a copyright strike on this particular video, so that's why I'm sort of leaving that out. But you go check it out. If you go and you look at the interview between just like Meghan, it's funny to me because they have just Meghan and just Oprah. And then they just sort of bring Prince Harry in there to just say, oh, he's like a pet, right? He's like that. Bring the pet in here, bring the accessory in here, because he has no real personality. He has nothing to say because he's an empty shell. He's been gutted out. He's been cored out by Meghan's BPD, or really maybe it's narcissistic personality disorder. But either way, he is just along for the ride at this point, and he's no longer a prince. He's Clark Kent because she has tied a big brick of kryptonite around his neck. He's no longer a prince. He doesn't even have the royal titles anymore. If they divorce for some reason, if something happens to her, I'm even skeptical that he would be welcomed back into the royal family. Maybe he would. I don't know. But the fact of the matter remains is this is the level of desperation, level of destitution, I guess. Maybe that's the despondency that you will get into as a blue pill guy, assuming you don't have any red pill awareness, or God forbid you even read something like my book or anything else. This is the situation between Meghan Markle and the situation with Prince Harry is the textbook example of how this stuff happens, and we're watching it live in real time and have been for a while now. And of course she's, bearing her soul to Oprah Winfrey, who we in some way think of as like a pope or the Dalai Lama, or, she's the high priestess of, the goddess movement right now. So she's going to go to confession. So, let me keep going here. I know it seems like most of the friends you still do have are simply passing you off by saying, get out and move out, because they're third party, right? But your life literally depends on you doing so. Prince Harry needs an intervention. Someone needs to go and kidnap him and take him somewhere and deprogram him. Cutting you off and disengaging you from external perspectives about your twisted relationship is essential to the BPD neurosis. Eventually, your friends and family will give up on the new you. And Prince Harry is definitely a new Prince Harry. He's nothing. I mean, he's like I said, an empty shell. That's the new Prince Harry. Let's see. That is okay. So you're living in fear. You're afraid she'll commit suicide if you uproot yourself. That's also, remember, suicidal tendencies, suicidal thoughts, suicidal threats is how BPD women keep their host active, how it keep their host alive. So if you decide to like put your foot down and walk away, that's when you get, I'll kill myself. That's when you get, I'm going to cut myself. That's when you get self mutilation, which is part of the BPD structure here. So when you get those threats, that's when the guy says, well, gosh, I can't leave her. I don't want her. I've never had a woman this crazy before. I don't want her to hurt herself. So maybe we can work it out. Maybe we can go to therapy. Maybe we can go to a marriage counselor. Maybe we can go to Oprah Winfrey and see if we can make this thing work. You're afraid she'll commit suicide if you uproot yourself, a classic BPD unspoken threat. But trust me on this, it'll be you who swallows a bullet long before she ever will. I've personally known 2 men who've done this and another who hung himself as a result of a BPD relationship. All right, so I'm going to stop right there. I'll let you guys, if you want to, you can go ahead and read the entirety of this thing. Now, so that said, that is, in a nutshell, that is borderline personality, BPD, borderline personality disorder. If you find yourself in that situation, if you find yourself in this cycle of I'm out, forget it, I'm done, and you're drawn back in because you think she's the one. God forbid you're still trapped in your blue pill mentality and you think she's your soulmate, especially in the beginning. That's exactly what Harry thinks. Exactly. So is Meghan Markle borderline personality disorder? I don't believe so. Not entirely. Maybe, but it might be compounded by narcissistic personality disorder. I'm going to read that to you right now. So narcissistic personality disorder, this is the diagnosis for that. See, you get hard data on the Rational Male. And there we go. Here's the hard data. These are the symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder. You'll notice that there's going to be a little bit of crossover with some of these, some of the borderline personality disorder things. Now I'm going to go a little bit over because I want to make sure that you understand the difference between like narcissism and solipsism, which all women have as part of their innate mental firmware, not for better or for worse. I'm not saying it's bad or it's good. Okay. These are the symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder. Signs and symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder are the severity of them vary. People with this disorder can have an exaggerated sense of self-importance. Now remember, narcissistic personality disorder is more prevalent in both women and men, whereas BPD is more prevalent in women. keep that in mind, because you'll probably notice that you'll see these patterns in guys that you know too. Number 2, have a sense of entitlement and require constant excessive admiration. I would say this is further compounded in the social media age. Expect to be recognized as superior even without achievements that warrant it. Number 4, exaggerate achievements and talents. Sound like anyone we know? Male or female? In this case, of course, we're looking at Meghan Markle. Wants that, they're crying about their privacy, and she's crying about her privacy. You don't hear anything from Prince Harry, right? He's just sort of there holding having his hand held, by the way, not him holding her hand. No, she's holding his hand like a little boy. There is a part in that interview where they're going and they're feeding the chickens, and you've got the prince, the Duke of Sussex, is that what they're called? And you've got that guy, royalty, sitting there like a 12-year-old boy trying to feed these little chickens while the adults are talking, while Meghan and Oprah are talking. In fact, Prince Harry says next to nothing in this. I mean, a few things, but like next to nothing. He is just simply there as almost like a child in some ways. So I found that really interesting, that this is where he's at. This is the new Harry. Right? Number 5, be preoccupied with fantasies about success, power, brilliance, beauty, or the perfect mate. 6, believe they are superior and can only associate with equally special people. Monopolize conversations and belittle or look down on people who they perceive as inferior. Expect special favors and unquestioning compliance with their expectations. Take advantage of others to get what they want. That's kind of nebulous, but okay, maybe so. Have an inability or unwillingness to recognize the needs and feelings of others. Be envious of others and believe others envy them, whether they do or they don't. Behave in an arrogant and haughty manner, coming across as conceited, boastful, and pretentious. And then lastly, insist on having the best of everything. For instance, the best car, the best office, blah, blah, blah. There's more to this. I think those are pretty good to just get started with NPD. So there you have NPD. And that applies to a lot of people. And I think that NPD is another one of these diagnoses that gets thrown around probably a bit too liberally, or whatever. I think that it is you can use any of those aspects, and if a guy is on his game, he's going to be cocky. There's does that mean he has NPD? No, probably not. There's guys who think a lot of themselves. There's guys who have a lot of ego investments in their own success. There's nothing wrong with that. It's only wrong when it becomes something that is obsessive. It's an obsession. It is something that can't be let go. And I think that if there's a parallel, if there's a crossover between BPD and NPD, I would say that Meghan Markle certainly has it. She manifests a lot of these same symptoms here. So I would call Meghan Markle, I would say she's BPD, but she certainly has tendencies for NPD as well. It's not that you couldn't have two simplexes, right? Or is that what you call it? Complexes, right? She couldn't have, it's not that she couldn't have some crossover in those. And it's not that other women wouldn't have crossover. Again, like the last thing I really wanted to sort of touch on right here is that it's real easy to take these diagnoses or these symptoms and apply them to your girlfriend, or apply them to the girls that were on, the Fresh and Fit podcast, right? Or apply them to somewhere else and say, see, she's got a disorder. There's something wrong. There's women today are just nuts. They're crazy. Well, yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's exacerbated. Maybe it's emphasized, let's say, certainly by social media, but those tendencies, the natural proclivity for certain psychological disorders manifests more in women than it does in men, depending on what that particular disorder is. You can have violent outbursts or something like that. Your men tend to, be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more, they fall into behavioral patterns that tend to be self-destructive because men tend to be more risk tolerant. So, and for women, It's really more about the self. Now, lastly here, I want to emphasize this is that you probably heard me say this. I've done at least one episode on women's innate solipsism. I've done 3 different articles, 2 of which are in, I believe, book 3 are in Positive Masculinity. But I talk about how women have an innate sense of solipsism. Now, solipsism is not narcissism. Narcissism is self-love, right? Narcissism is an obsessive, like compulsive sense of self-love. That's why I call it narcissism. You know, Narcissus sees his image in the pool and falls in love with himself, falls into the pool and drowns, right? Because he's so enamored with himself. That's why we call it narcissism. Narcissus. It's not that women can't be narcissistic. They are. Men can be narcissistic as well, just sort of as I think when women are narcissists and men are narcissists, they are so for different reasons. For women, it is not so much a sense of, I think it's more out of a sense of entitlement, certainly out of a sense of hubris. And it's like, I love me so much, you know, that kind of stuff. For men, I think that narcissism, if they tend to develop it, is more about status, and it is more about dominance hierarchies. Whereas for women, it is really more of an intense love. But for women, I think narcissism comes a little bit more easy than it does for men, because men have to perform. And if they perform well enough, or if they believe in themselves well enough, even whether it's an irrational self-confidence, I think is what Royce used to call it. If men possess irrational self-confidence enough, you know, fake it till you make it, you know, treat yourself like a king to have other people treated like a king. That's a law of power, right? There's a different motivation for men to sort of develop narcissism than there is for women to. I think that narcissism in women, and as well as borderline personality disorder, comes more naturally to women because women have an innate sense of solipsism. Now, solipsism, people are going to say, oh, you use that term incorrectly, Rollo. Solipsism is a philosophical thing. Yes, I know. Thank you. So is hypergamy. We can expand the definition. It's 2021. We can expand that definition to describe, use it as an abstract for things that we're seeing and we're observing right now. So when I say solipsism in women, what I'm saying is that let's talk about the philosophy. The philosophy of solipsism is that nothing exists outside the self. Right? So everything that anyone outside that exists outside of me, anything that's with that camera right there, the computer right here, everything, all of these are just like sort of manifestations of things that only that focus one way, me, right? And so it seems like it's very self-centered, it's very arrogant, it could be narcissistic, right? I love me so much that everything that I see around me only exists to serve my experience in this life. And so that's the sort of like, and that's the bonehead, yes, I get it, the bonehead definition of what solipsism is. For women, when I'm talking about solipsism, it is the idea that it's very similar to that philosophy, that anything that outside of the woman exists only to serve for her survival. Solipsism in the feminine sense, in the innate psyche of women, right? The evolved mental firmware of women is a necessary part of that woman's experience because she's the most vulnerable sex. So things that exist outside of her, you know, the women in her life, the things in her life, the men in her life exist for one thing: to provide her security, to facilitate her reality. And so, and there's a necessary real reason for that. This isn't, again, I'm not making a judgment call here. You can make the judgment if you want to, you can make a judgment call yourself, but I'm not making a judgment call here, whether it's bad or it's good. In fact, I would argue that women's innate solipsism is what contributes to the survival of the human species, because women have to be focused on their own survival because they're the incubators of the next generation. So when women have that innate solipsistic sense, it is a survival mechanism, survival adaptation up here, like it's the firmware. And also that gets transferred and associated with the children as well. So we get what now, as a result of that, in a social sense, we get what's called the cult of the child, right? We do whatever's in the child's best interest. And we get enough guys on board who are parentally invested, hopefully, in their own children or in the children of other men. And we think that we lift parental investment in usually beta males up to some sort of heroic notion. That's part of women's solipsism. They need you to facilitate that for their survival, their provisioning, their protection. and you being a parental investor in their reality. You're facilitating that reality. All of those expectations, all of that hubris, all that entitlement that we've been talking about for the last week on other podcasts, derives from an innate, evolved sense of solipsism, which is necessary. Now, taken to its extreme, it can be bad. It can turn into narcissism. It can turn into borderline personality disorder. So when a woman says something like, "Oh, it's unfair that guys can go cheat and I can't," well, that's coming from a position of fear. It's coming from a position of fear because what that's saying is that it's a declaration by guys who are, in this case, high value guys, saying, I'll be invested in you and kids, but I'm going to go and be invested in other women as well. So what that is it's sort of a diffusion of responsibility, but it's also a diffusion of resources. You can only put so much into one woman at one time. And as I've said before, men and women's mating strategy is adversarial. And that's part of that adversarialness that is rooted in women's solipsism, because women are the most vulnerable sex. 9 months, they're gestating a child. And then for the next, at least 7-8 years, they're raising that kid. And this is in our ancestral past, raising that child to self-sufficiency so that they have that opportunity to go and breed again. So they have to look for a guy who is invested in them, whether that's the guy that had the really great genes, the sexy son genes, or it's the guy who's the beta male who believes it's his, God-given duty to take care of children that aren't actually his by sublimating his paternal instincts. So generally, when we're looking at these kinds of disorders, when we're looking at narcissistic personality disorder, when we're looking at borderline personality disorder, in women, they are rooted in that innate, evolved need for solipsism, to see everything else as sort of this, everything serves their purpose. Everything serves the feminine imperative. And taken to its extreme, we get gynocentrism. Taken to a social extreme, taken to a worldwide, global, political, social, sociological, let's just say, extreme, that's where gynocentrism is rooted in. It's rooted in that innate solipsism of women. So when you get women who just, they don't speak the same language as you, when you're saying, we're trying to logically say certain things to them and say, here, this is the way it is. Here I'm laying it out. Well, that seems immoral or unfair, but it only seems unfair from a female perspective. Because if it doesn't fulfill those needs, then suddenly it's selfish and immoral and it's from the devil, right? If you don't serve a utility to women, then what use are you? And now we're seeing Prince Harry and Meghan Markle play this out live in real time in a big global international scale with, like I said, Oprah Winfrey, the high priestess of the goddess movement. And it trends everywhere. Heck, I was just looking for the tags for this video, and Meghan Markle is hot, hot, hot. So that's that for borderline personality disorder. How do you deal with that? Well, you get out of it. That's the best advice I can give you. If you are in a particular relationship with a woman and you suspect that she has borderline personality disorder, or she has been clinically diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, get out. That's the best advice I can give you. Save yourself, because you are not a therapist. You are not Jesus Christ. You are not her personal savior. Because what happens is you think you can sustain it. You can solve it. And that is part of the neurosis. You believing that if you do certain things, or if you're just more supportive, or if you just, gave up your rifle collection, or you stopped your hobbies, or you gave up your ambitions and your passions, because those are the things that trigger her and trigger that in neurosis and that insane level of jealousy. And then again, like I said, it's manic depression. It goes from like really hot monkey sex to like, I hate you. If you would just do this, you're just like your mom or dad or whatever. Like when you get into those, that's not healthy. That's not a healthy relationship. And by what you think is, I can solve this, I can fix this. The fact that you're saying I can fix this means I got to fix you. You have to fix you because you feel like it's really a form of gaslighting. You feel, or you believe that if you did just certain things, that you'd have the ideal relationship with your dream girl because she's hot and she's like, hot monkey sex. And God forbid you marry someone like that. God forbid you have children with someone like that. Imagine the effect that will have on your children. Imagine the effect that will have on your already existing family, who probably don't want to have anything to do with you because they say that she's nuts. And not like, oh, she's crazy nuts. No, she's clinically, certifiably imbalanced. Get out. Leave. I'm telling you with 100% assurity, I know I've done it before. Get out. It's the only solution, really. You're not going to save her. She needs to save herself, if that it can even happen. The best way is just to simply eject and save your life, because that's what it comes down to. And I wrote that if you want to check out the borderline personality disorder article, I say that, and I go into some suggestions of what you can do to get out of that. And there's I should say, even now from 2012 up to now, there's still a really vibrant commentary on that blog post. Guys sharing their experience with their own BPDs. So again, don't think that she's automatically BPD, but if you can confirm that she is, or if it's like a consistent chronic thing, get out, because your life depends on it. Seriously, you will commit suicide long before she will commit suicide. It's like a parasite host relationship. You're the host and she's the parasite, and you will never be you will never change yourself enough to solve or cure her neuroses. Get out. That's the last thing I'm going to say. Get out. And you know what, Prince Harry, if you're watching this video, get out. That's exactly what I would tell him too, because his life literally depends on him leaving Meghan Markle. And it would be better if he did it on his own. And you'll say, well, you could say, well, society, the social cues or whatever, social graces, whatever, society will come down on him for that. You know what? I would rather they come down on you in the short term, Harry, than for you to swallow a bullet, because you will never be what she wants you to be. And eventually she will end up cheating on you. And eventually you'll probably put up with it. You'll probably be okay with it. Well, she's got to work things out. I'm not enough for her, blah, blah, blah. You'll make up your own rationales for it. It's one of the reasons why I think like poly is such a nonsense, blue pill beta mating strategy right now, because it's the best. It's what other choice you have, right? That if you're that low on SMV in the sexual market value, it seems logical. Well, it's not. Get out. Very, very simple. And I know it sounds when you're wrapped up in it, I know it's tough. And if you're also a guy that's watching this and you're in that kind of a relationship right now, get out. It's the best thing that you can do. So that's my short for today. And I will see you guys on Rule Zero on Saturday at 11:30 a.m. And I believe it's John from Modern Life Dating will be hosting. So there you go. I'll see you guys later. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments or hit me up on Twitter. I am Rollo Tomasi at Rational Male. And or you can hit me up in email. All my contact information is in the description. And if you want to support the show, please do. Again, the links are in the description as well. So thanks, guys. I'll see you later.